Welcome to the LA Real Estate Podcast, our podcast on buying and selling real estate in Los Angeles. Today on the show, Justin and I will do a neighborhood spotlight on Tujunga. We'll discuss a unique buyers program that can get you into a property at a really low rate. And we're also talking all about appraisals with Glen Kangas. Hey, Justin.
Hey, Sarah.
It's nice to see your smiling face in studio.
It is. It's nice to see your face.
So, tell me what you've been up to.
Oh, God. Craziness. So, I bought a house.
Woo!
In Tujunga, which so that ties into our subject today, Neighborhood Spotlight. And it was a fixer. So, tons of work. With, baby and it's just been absolute chaos.
I remember those years when the kiddos were young. Oh, I was so very tired. So I actually, finally COVID got me. So about a month and a half, 2 months ago, it got me. So I got pretty sick. I had a fever for 8 or 9 days. I lost my sense of taste and smell, which is unusual now, I think, with the variant. So no long-term effects.
Has that come back?
Really. Yeah, it did, but it took a while. Like it just came back and now food tastes so good to me. So I've been eating more than I should.
I don't know. My little sister couldn't taste anything or smell anything for like over a year. And I don't know if she can now.
God,
like, I don't know
that's
if it
a
ever
long
came
time.
back. I got to ask her. Like, hey, I'll ask her. I guess she'll be back for Christmas dinner. I'll ask her, can you taste this?
How good is the food? It's crazy. I mean, it's so nice that it feels like we're back to somewhat normalcy, although there's a lot of stuff still going around. But hopefully everyone out there, that you guys are all healthy and safe, and hopefully we're on the tail end of this thing. So we've all kind of gone through a really crazy time together, but we're glad you're here with us now, and let's talk some real estate. Justin, neighborhood spotlight time.
Neighborhood Spotlight.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about Tujunga. I was born here, lived here, selling houses for years. Somehow I just never really... It never came up. And doing Northeast LA, it never kind of showed up on my radar.
People don't talk about Tujunga very much. And I found out about Tujunga maybe 6 years ago. I had a client specifically looking in Tujunga. And maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Awesome kind of biker looking dude, older guy named Charlie. And he was a riot. He was hilarious, but he's like, I want to live in Tujunga. I think the value is there. Prices are low. So I spent a lot of time there, and it's such an interesting area, but you're right. Nobody ever talks about it. So what drove you to buy in Tujunga?
Number one, price. So we were looking for entry-level LA real estate price, which means $700,000 roughly. Like, you're not really going to find a house that you want to live in for too much less than $700,000 within 50 miles of where we're staying right now. For sure.
So price.
And then when you do look at the neighborhoods, can buy a house for let's just call it 700. I'm actually seeing houses in Tujunga all through the sixes now that the market's sort of correcting. There's one house for sale there, a real fixer, all cash, that's $400,000 for 2 bedrooms, if you can believe that. But when you look at all the neighborhoods where you can get a house, it's Jay, for 700 or under or around or close. You can count them on one hand, really. Yeah,
you're looking for something probably very old, needs a lot of work, and very small.
So we have a new baby, as we've discussed on previous podcasts. We needed a lot of space, and we had a little budget.
So you can hide from the baby.
So we could have a baby and an office because I work from home.
You do need room when you have an expanding family, for sure.
So we were able to find a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, mid-century post and beam house.
Wow.
The nice yard, big yard, in a really quiet, nice, safe neighborhood for, well under $700,000.
And we should mention, I know this price probably is blowing some people's minds, that $700,000 is an inexpensive house. These mid-century houses are so desirable and so hot. They often get into the highest bidding wars. And when people pay for them, it makes no sense. The final price just makes no sense. People overpay for these mid-century houses because they're cool. They're cool and awesome.
That's one of the things I wanted to talk about at Tujunga. Full of mid-century houses. Like every block, there's just, post and beam. They're everywhere. And then you look at the other price, the other neighborhoods that you can get those prices in. You're talking about, South LA, El Monte. Maybe little pockets of Lincoln Heights. Used to be El Sereno, no longer. Then you have to go all the way up to like Sylmar or something. Like
right.
When you take that all into consideration, it's like a nice neighborhood. You can walk your stroller, walk your dog. Really nice, beautiful mountains. You're 15 minutes from Pasadena, 15 minutes from Silver Lake. My wife works in the studios. It's a little bit further actually because you have to go around the mountain. Like
right.
As the crow flies, you're like 2 miles from Burbank, but you have to actually drive around that whole mountain. Like there's it's like a second valley, right? It's a valley on the other. To the east of the valley.
It's another part of LA that does not feel like LA.
It doesn't. And I just was blown away by how much you could get for your money that close to all of the stuff that we need to be. And it just seemed like a fit for us, so we bought it.
Have you found, are there many little coffee shops and restaurants? Have you found little spots?
Well, so Foothill Boulevard, you can basically take all the way across. I mean, I think you can basically take it to San Bernardino.
Wow.
If I'm right. I mean, you can drive basically from Sylmar, Foothill Boulevard, and Pasadena. So in the main commercial center is called a street called Commerce. It comes off of Foothill. And it's half empty. So that's the difference between, if you look at everything that Tujunga has to offer, like what it doesn't have is the hip stuff.
Right. Not
and
yet,
it's got this whole commercial thing where all of the buildings are basically empty. They're not spray painted. There's no garbage. They're not derelict. They're just empty. And so it's this weird thing. And I keep thinking like, man, if you just bought up every house around here and then put in a bunch of coffee shops and cool bars and cafes on that strip, like this place would just take off because it's such a nicer quality of life than the other neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. That are priced that way.
And, it's a really good option for people that specifically are looking for mid-century. And if you get a lot of mid-century lovers in the area, I remember when we bought in our property, and it was in 2008, the neighborhood has changed so much. And I remember when the first hipster coffee shop came in, and I was thinking, oh, wow, I wonder if this is what this means. And then another coffee shop, then a restaurant, then a bar, and it's a really interesting shift in the neighborhood. But it's kind of fun to grow up with your neighborhood. I was a different person when I bought my house. I didn't have kids. I was in a band. I was playing and just having a really great time. And then as I grew up, so did the neighborhood, it sort of feels like, if that makes sense. And it's just interesting to see the shift in the communities. Obviously, gentrification's a big issue as well. And it's a really fine line because people do get displaced and rents go up and things become unaffordable. It would be so nice if that was a balance with a beautiful, safe community with nice shops and restaurants where locals could still afford to live there. So it's weird because you feel like you're part of the gentrification, but at the same time, you just want a nice house to raise your kids in.
Well, it's interesting too. What I always think about with gentrification, because it's like, on one level, you're doing harm to these local renters, right? Mm-hmm. You no longer afford to live in the community that they've become comfortable in. But you're doing so much good for the local owners. So a lot of these people have owned this house for 20, 30 years. They bought it for, the grandma bought it for $45,000. It's been totally paid off, and somebody's offering them $1 million for their house. It's like that wealth is also going into that community, into those families. And so It's a double-edged sword. There's good and bad with it.
I think the good is trying to always get renters into owning their own homes. And that it really is the key to building wealth. If you can own your own property, you can leverage it. You can leverage it to buy other investments. You are not paying rent and just throwing it away. So my goal is always, always, always to get people into owning their own home. In my opinion, it is the best investment because you're always going to need a place to live. Anyways, on that note, the teacher becomes the student. What was it like to shift your perspective into becoming a buyer?
I've helped so many people through this process, and you still get those same knee-jerk reactions, but you have to keep them in check when you are the realtor too, because you're dealing with the person off. So I represented myself, which is a nice way to take another little chunk off there of your closing costs, right? And basically, the transaction kind of pays for itself. If you're a realtor, so maybe everybody go out and get a realtor license,
right.
then buy it. No, just kidding. Hire us. Don't do that. But it was definitely nice. There's certain things that like I would do for myself that I would never do for a client. So like I took a look at the chimney and I was like, I'm not going to pay $500 for chimney inspection. I know what that chimney inspection, I know what it's going to say.
Right.
And I'd rather spend that $500 doing the $500 of work that chimney needs.
Right.
I can do that as a realtor for myself.
Right.
For a client, I'd have to say.
Right. With a client, you for sure want to err on the side of caution because nobody likes surprises after they bought the house, but you were willing to take the risk because you probably knew best case, worst case scenario. You were open to,
and nobody to blame but myself, right? But I definitely wouldn't. I would ask a client to pay for the chimney inspection, and I put the money towards putting in a Spark restaurant on this minor things that needed. Right. I could see it was in good shape, but I've also seen 100 of these reports,
so you know exactly what to look for, and
which is stuff that I'll point out to clients, but I won't tell them definitively, and I'll never tell them don't get the inspection. I'll say, hey, I'm not a professional chimney inspector. Here's what I can see, but let's get a pro opinion on it.
Well, congratulations on buying your home. That's amazing. Very, very exciting. All right, we'll be right back with a buyer's tip. Here's a buyer's tip. Landscaping can add a ton of value. Plant a few trees as soon as you move in. Avocado trees and citrus can be amazing to have on your property, and it can add value. In the studio with me, I have Glen Kangas, who is an appraiser. Glen, how long have you been an appraiser for?
I've been an appraiser for 30 years now.
Whoa. So in 30 years, you must have seen so many shifts in the market.
Yeah, we've seen a few shifts in the market over that time. When I started, it was all foreclosure work, short sales, loss mitigation, loan modifications, that kind of stuff. So that's when I learned was during all of that.
And what would you say your percentage is as far as just like regular purchases versus other types of appraisals?
Over the years, it's obviously with the interest rates dropping, then it's become pretty heavy on the refinance side, which in the last 4 or 5 months has changed back to a lot more purchases.
Right.
I also do a lot of non-lender type appraisals too, but yeah, right now it's a lot of purchases for anything for lenders.
So for anyone listening, when you first put an offer on a house, most of the time, I would say, a lender will order an appraisal. Now, the buyer pays for the appraisal, and what it is somebody's opinion of the value of your home. So, Glen, what is the first thing you do? Do you do research before you even go to the property?
Yeah, you typically pull it up, number one, just so you know what to expect, whether it's something as simple as how much time do you need to do the inspection, measure, take pictures, notes, that type of thing. I've become into all the mobile apps and stuff like that, so I actually run as much data as I can ahead of time and have comparables with me, so once I see the house, I can then kind of narrow that down because then we can take the pictures when they're required and that type of thing. So just to make the process be quicker. But yeah, you typically research some data, but I personally like to see the house before I really start, sifting through the data and deciding what's relevant and what's not.
I guess that makes sense. And then how much, so It's one thing in Los Angeles, what's nice as an appraiser, I'm sure, is there tends to be a lot of comparable properties because we have such a big population. There's so many sales. So a comp, what we call a comp, is a comparable property that's sold generally, what would you say, within the last 6 months?
Yeah, the typical standard of the years has been 6 months. In a hot market, it can be 2 to 3 months just because there's a lot of activity. When things slow down, then you start maybe expanding that a little bit. And the more unique the property, the more wide your range of search is. So if it's a standard home in the neighborhood, then there's usually lots and lots of comps. But if there's something unique about it, it's really big, it's really small, it's got an ADU or a guest house or pool or tennis court, depending on what neighborhood you're in.
And we do something similar when we work with sellers, and buyers too, when we're talking about offer prices. But specifically with sellers, as real estate agents, we do the same sort of analytics at the beginning, maybe not as in depth as an appraiser, but we pull the comps and we see what things have listed for and what they've sold for, because often list price has nothing to do with the final sale price. So we choose a price, and then often we're shocked by how different the final sales price is. I mean, the last few years, things would sell sometimes $200,000 to $300,000 above list, which just seems crazy. So when you're doing your appraisals, now that our market is shifting a little, how does that change how you appraise a property?
The biggest thing, and we use it whether it's going up, down, or stable, is doing our analysis of what the market trends are. So in a declining market, obviously you want to know how fast is it declining. If in an increasing market, you want to know how fast it's increasing. And it does affect, we make time adjustments. So in those cases, you want the most recent sale possible, which requires the least amount of adjustment. So that's the biggest thing that changes in a market like this is we've gone from an increasing market or stable market for God knows how long.
Years.
To all of a sudden, the market kind of went, whoa, hey, wait a minute. And we're seeing some areas with a lack of sales, but the value's still holding. So the number of sales is down, but the value is okay. We've seen some, moderate drops in price. And we've seen some areas that have dropped a little more in price, but we haven't seen anything super dramatic at this point.
Well, and I don't know if we will, because I think so many people locked in at really great rates that it doesn't really make sense to sell when you can rent your property for way more than your mortgage. Your taxes are low because you pay taxes based on the purchase price. So if the house, and there's a slight adjustment every year. So if you bought your house years and years ago and you sell it and then have to rebuy, now you're paying property taxes based on the new purchase price. And it could be a difference of going from $4,000 a year in property taxes to $12,000 or $13,000 a year in property taxes. So there's not a lot of incentive for people to sell. And I think it's a great thing, to be honest, because people can hold their values because they have these low rates. The monthly payment is affordable. They've locked in for 30 fixed years. And also the loans, I feel, were a little less risky than they were in, say, 2008. People had to show proof of income. People had to show that they had reserves. And so I think the people that got loans were a little bit more financially secure and can wait this wave out. But it's interesting to hear that you're not seeing a dramatic shift in the market.
It all comes down to supply and demand, right?
Right.
No matter what anybody talks about, it's always supply and demand. Right now is completely different than 2008. I think the loan quality is way better than it was. The things they were doing loan-wise back then was just absolutely foolish.
If you're a listener and you haven't seen The Big Short, you should go watch it. If you want to understand what happened in 2008 and the shenanigans that went on, really good movie, easy to digest, easy to make it understandable. If you don't know a lot about what happened in 2008, such a good movie.
Back to supply and demand, right? The Fed is trying to drop the market. They've actually said we want the market to go down. And their only method of doing it is to try and reduce demand by raising interest rates. Like you pointed out, if you own a house with a 3% interest rate, why would you sell it to go buy another house at a 7%?
Exactly.
You won't.
Exactly.
Because it's not only your property taxes, which are massive, it's your loan payment just doubled.
Right.
So you're going to add property tax and loan payment to, and if you're finding your house, there's no need to it.
Yeah.
So what you saw, or what I've seen in my analysis, is the interest rates actually have been going up since the beginning of the year. They didn't start in June.
Right.
But around June is when it got really like, hey, wait a minute, the interest rates are really going up. And so a bunch of people rushed to sell then. People panicked and values started to decline a little bit. But since then, people are like, hey, why would I sell my house? So then we went from a little push in supply. Now we're back down to just a shortage. There aren't any options. What are you going to buy? You're going to buy that one, or that's it.
That's it. Okay, so a different shift here. I wanted to ask you, this is a question I get all the time. Do solar panels add value to a home in an appraisal?
The only ones that we can give value to are ones that are owned, free, and clear.
So paid off, so you're not leasing your panels, you own them outright. And how much would, let's say, a $750,000 to $1 million house, nice condition, there's two right beside each other, one has solar panels, one does not. What would you value the additional approximately?
What we've been seeing, it's been very hard to extract an adjustment from the market because the data is so inconclusive and not clear. I have to call agents. Was it leased? Sometimes they make the comment, sometimes they don't. But when we do an income analysis and just kind of cash flow analysis of it, right now we're seeing maybe about $3 a kilowatt. People are paying $4 to $5 a watt for installation, and we're getting value back at about $3 a watt. So you're still running more than 50% of the upfront cost, but you're still not getting your money back on it.
So if you've spent $30,000, well, it's probably less than that now. Let's say $20,000 for this so super nice solar system. When you go to sell your house, the appraiser is most likely not going to value it $20,000 more than the neighbor that's the same house.
Correct.
And then what about pools? How do you value pools?
Pools are a little easier to, it's a little easier to find a house that sold with one and without one that are fairly similar to figure out the value. When we group some data together, we've seen the pool homes in a moderate neighborhood will sell for about 10% more than ones without a pool. But part of that is actually the lots are generally bigger. For that. So we've seen anywhere from 5 to 8% for the pool. The higher end you get, the lower that percentage goes, but the bigger the actual dollar amount goes.
That makes sense.
So, in the low end, you were talking to 700,000 range, which is the low end now, right? You might see 30 to 50,000 for a pool. And when you get over $1 million, now you're, 50, 75, and then you get over 2 or 3 million, you might, because they're more complex pools, and obviously the cost now of a pool is way high.
For sure.
Then you get to some bigger numbers. So, but it tends to be actually most accessories or amenities, whether it's a pool or a guest house or a tennis court or an ADU even, very rarely do you see any one feature add more than 10% to the value.
That's a really good point. So if you are buying or doing, you're ready to sell, you want to put a pool in, you want to put a solar panel in, if you want to do it for your own enjoyment, that's great. But it's not necessarily going to come back to you on the final sales price.
Correct.
So,
just like everything, you're not going to get dollar for dollar out. For the most part.
Well, Glen, thank you so much for coming and joining us on our podcast. We'd love to have you back. I have so many more questions for you. If you want to contact Glen directly with any more questions on appraisals, his information will be in the podcast notes. And thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on. I love to talk about appraisals in real estate. I could talk all day long, so I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion with you about it.
Thank you so much, Glen. Here's a buyer's tip. Flooring. Hardwood floors are always better than carpet and such a good investment. Choose a classic color tone that isn't too trendy. Very dark floors show every single scratch. So when you're choosing hardwood floors, get something that you know will always look good. Justin, you found out about a very cool loan program that we wanted to talk about a little bit.
On this episode, we've talked about how much higher rates are in 2022 than the beginning of 2022 or 2021. I just closed a long time. I've been working with this client for years. Couldn't qualify anymore with COVID because she lost a lot of work and then got back into it. And we just closed on a cute little bungalow on Echo Park Ave, like right next to Valerie and all that stuff. And she is paying 3.75%.
Whoa. And that is about half of what a standard rate is right now at the end of 2022, very end of 2022. So how does this program work?
So the program works by the census tract. It's a particular lender that offers it and only in particular census tracts. So I've been looking in this price point and trying to find properties for this client that where we can take advantage of the low competition or the no competition in this case that there is in this market and, pay a lower price because the market's a lot of buyers have bailed from the rates and then score a rate that's, January's rate.
That's incredible. And we should say we don't know how long this program is going to be around for, and we'll see how that happens. If you are interested in getting more information, please reach out to us on our info is always on the podcast notes, and we can help guide you, do an introduction with a lender that is providing this program. And it might be a really great way if you're slightly underqualified with traditional programs at these rates. If you're open to diverse homes and diverse locations, we might be able to get you into a property for a low rate. So really something to look into.
And I'll add, it's not like you've got to go to Timbuktu to get this rate. A census tract is different than a neighborhood or a zip code. So like within Highland Park, there are census tracts that qualify. In North Hollywood, there's census tracts that qualify in Echo Park, in Glassell Park. All over Northeast LA, where we do the majority of our work, there's pockets that qualify for this.
Incredible. Well, reach out to us again. Don't wait because the program might not be around for a very long time. Word's getting out. And it is a great way to get into a property at a very low rate and low payment. That's pretty much it for us today. Thank you for listening to the LA Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Skelton. With me today is Justin from the Skelton Group. If you are looking for a property, if you're thinking of selling, please reach out to us. Justin and I would love to help you. We take great care of our clients. We're passionate, obviously, about what we do, and we'd love to work with you. Also, I want to thank our guest, Glen Kangas, who is the appraiser that came in earlier today. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on the next one. We're aiming for mediocre here, guys. Yeah.